Hey guys, in today's video, we are going to be diving a little bit deeper into what the Sonos S2 14.12 update did to the Sonos Arc together with the Sonos Sub. Now, we have already done the video on how 14.12 actually affected the Sonos Arc, and there was a huge reduction in the volume output. So what did it do to the Sonos Arc when it's being paired with a Sonos Sub? And that's the question that we want answered today. So for those of you who are used to my channel, you will know that I try to deliver the upfront summary. So if you don't have time to stay around, you don't have to stay on and listen to me blabber on. I tend to talk quite a bit. Now the upfront summary. So the Sonos Arc was actually impacted quite significantly with the 14.12 update from Sonos, and its volume was significantly reduced. For those of you who have the Sonos Arc paired with a sub, be it the Gen 1, Gen 2, or the Gen 3, or even in sub dual configuration, you're not going to be hit as hard. So the Sonos Arc on its own had a volume reduction of about 5 decibels after moving from 14.10 to 14.12. When you have a Sonos Arc with the Sonos Sub paired together with it, the reduction in overall volume was just at about 1 dB or less. So with the Sub, you don't get that big decrease in volume. The Sub bass has not really been impacted. So the Sub did actually keep up its volume output. So for those of you who think that the Sub is actually not really working and the whole bass output from the Sub has been reduced, I'm actually wondering whether there is actually another bug which didn't affect me. So because on my Sub, which I will show with frequency response charts later to substantiate that point, you don't actually get those dip in the Sub output volume. But the one thing that the Sonos 14.12 update did to the Arc when it's paired together with the Sub is that the mid-range gets kind of reduce a little bit, which I wonder why. Maybe it's not so much the mid-range, but more like towards the higher bass region of it. It got significantly reduced. And when your lower bass is kept up and your mid-bass, upper bass is reduced, the sound signature tend to come across as a little bit muddier. And that is not helped by the fact that the mid-range and the higher frequencies are being reduced in volume by the 14.12 update. So there are a couple of things that you can do, and this is also part of the upfront summary. So if you don't have time, just take these changes and try to apply it to see whether it helps you. So my recommendation, if you are running a Sonos Arc with a Sub, and if you have upgraded to the 14.12 version already, is to reduce your bass setting by about 2 notches. So whatever setting you are at now, reduce it by 2. And for the Sub, you reduce it by 3 notches. So if you are, say, for example, at -1 for your Sub, you could move it down to -4. If you are at a 4 for Sub, for example, you should move it down to a +1. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do to the mid-range. Now, it will all become clearer in just a while if you have the time to stay around, so I can step you through the frequency response charts. And since you're going to be staying around, let me just shift my computer a little bit. Now, I haven't been coming up with my videos quite frequently within the last couple of days, maybe about a week plus, or maybe 2 weeks since the last video, because I was really busy trying to make some changes to the room. Now, this is the point where I start blabbering and I try to engage you as a person, as a viewer on this channel. So just to share with you a little bit, now you see that I have a permanent desk. It is actually permanently mounted. It's a lot more comfortable for me. I have some shelves put up. I've changed the color of the room tone a little bit. So now it's a gray instead of the wallpaper that I had put up. The sound panels have been put up to absorb the reflections of sound in the room so that I can do my testing a little bit better and you will be able to hear my voice a little bit clearer. Now, this whole thing took me a lot of time, right? Painting is not easy. Installing the shelves are not easy. And the whole room was just a mess and completely dirty. Now, if I were to shift my camera, which I won't because I already have it mounted up, you'll see the mess in the back alley below the table where the wires are just running crazy. All right, which is why I like wireless products, right? Sonos are all wireless audio products, and I like them because they don't carry wires with them to use the wires to carry the sound. But in times like this, when Sonos releases an update that messes up with the sound, then that is when things get a little bit hairy, and I just like, darn, should I have done something else? If only I could maybe go back in time to remind myself not to apply the update or turn off auto update. But another story, another day. I am actually thinking of a story around that. So if you are interested in this kind of storytelling, do stay tuned, subscribe to the channel and listen on. So just a very quick recap. I'm going to be pulling out frequency response charts. And what you can see here is actually a blank chart right now, all right? And on the left, it stretches from 20 hertz all the way to the right to 20 kilohertz. And that is 20,000 hertz. So the first chart I'm going to be pulling out, just as a recap, is this red chart here. And this red chart represents the frequency response of the Sonos Arc on its own without the sub before the 14.12 update was made. So this was at version 14.10. So what did 14.12 bring to the table for those of you who are just running the Sonos Arc without the sub? This blue line, this cyan color line, right, is the frequency response chart right after the update was applied. The mic wasn't moved, nothing was moved, the room is still the same, the soundbar is in the exact same location, but this is the frequency response, which is why I said there was an overall reduction in volume of about 5 dB. So this is actually pretty high, right? Throughout the entire band, from the low bass to the mid-range to the higher frequencies, you are seeing a huge reduction in the output volume. So the sound signature didn't really change that much, but if you try to adjust the volume upwards, you'll see how it matches up to the old one. So I'm adjusting the volume, right? So this is how it's supposed to work, assuming everything is linear. Okay, and I have increased it by about 5 dB at this point. So this 5 dB increase, you'll see that the mid-range, where the vocals are, is actually bumped up just a little bit. The treble has been brought down and rolled off a little bit, but the bass technically is not really affected. In fact, below 100 hertz, there's actually a slight bump in the higher bass frequencies. So if you felt that your bass was lacking, I would say, and I would think, that you might have been misled by an overall reduction in volume. So if you increase the volume, actually the sound profile isn't that bad, but it is, yes, very, very quiet. So I'm just going to revert this back. Okay, so now I'm pulling back the chart to before a volume increase, and that you can see throughout how 14.12 affected the sound output from the Sonos Arc. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be pulling up the Sonos Arc with the sub, but before the update was applied. So this is the 14.10 sound profile of the Sonos Arc when it's being paired with a subwoofer. And as you can see, if I were to try to compare without a sub and with a sub, so the red line is without the sub, the green line is with the sub. All the bass frequencies below 90 hertz, they are being propped up just a little bit. Well, actually not just a little bit, quite significantly, right? So to avoid confusion, I'm going to remove the red chart, which is the Sonos Arc on its own. So you're just seeing the Sonos Arc with the sub 14.10. Now the next line I'm going to be pulling up is the orange curve, and this is the Sonos Arc with the sub 14.12. Now, it might surprise some of you, right, that, hey, I thought I experienced a drop in the bass. And at this point, I have two guesses. The first guess is that maybe some of us are confusing bass with volume. Now, overall, you will see that there is indeed a volume drop, all right? But it's not so much of a bass drop. If you see the bass frequencies below 100 hertz, the orange curve is actually trailing behind. Yes, definitely a slight reduction, but it's very, very close to the original curve of the Sonos Arc with sub in 14.10. But it is what's happening beyond that that is the worrying part. Now, at about this frequency range here, all right, you are looking at 380 400 hertz, right? At about 3 to 400 hertz, there is a huge valley that is being pulled down by the 14.12 update. So the Sonos Arc with Sub, previously, it was actually holding quite flat in this entire region between these two bulk lines of 100 hertz and 1 kilohertz. It is actually pretty flat with a slight increase towards 1 kilohertz, right? And that's where most of our dialogue, most of the movie's dialogue will actually stay around. But 14.12 actually pulled this down quite significantly. So I don't know how that is supposed to help in the dialogue, right? But overall, the volume would have been reduced while still keeping the bass quite high. Now, beyond 1 kilohertz, you'll see that there is the same drastic decrease. So what this tells me, when you try to compare it with the Sonos Arc on its own, is that Sonos didn't really retune the Sub, because the Sub took over from about this point, 100 hertz or so, 110 hertz or so, and below, right? It took over at this point. So the Sub wasn't really retuned. If it was retuned, it was probably insignificant anyway. But the retuning happened between 100 hertz and 1 kilohertz and 1 kilohertz and beyond. So the treble actually did come down quite a bit. Now, my earlier suggestion was to increase the volume. So the same thing I'm going to be doing, and I will show you how I do this here. This is a demonstration. This is an illustration, not so much the actual increase in the volume of the system, because I'm also assuming that the increase in volume is linear, which is unlikely to be linear, but this is a proxy to how this is going to sound like, right? So I'm going to increase the overall volume. Now, if I increase the overall volume to kind of match the previous thereabout, right? Plus a little bit here, minus a little bit there. So the orange curve, after increasing it by about 4 dB or so, which I would guess and estimate about a plus 10 to plus 15% increase in the volume on your Sonos S2 app, I would say that you are looking at still a very slight dip at about 400 hertz or so, but below 300, below 250 hertz, the bass response, right, of the lower bass, the mid bass, and the upper bass has been tremendously increased, which should explain, if you were trying to listen at the same perceived volume, not the same volume setting on your Sonos system, but the same perceived volume, the bass then overpowers quite a bit of the rest of the curves. And that could lead to the perception of muddy bass. But otherwise, the sound signature beyond 1 kilohertz, which means to say the upper registers, the higher frequencies, they are not really affected by much. If I increase the volume just even a little bit more and to bring it within shot, you'll see that most of it is still in line with the previous tuning, but your frequencies right up to the male vocals into the 200-300 hertz or so is now significantly being pushed up quite a bit. And bear in mind, this is the Sonos Arc with the Sub paired together. So earlier in the upfront summary, I suggested a couple of things that you can do in order to help you recover the previous experience you had with your Sonos Arc and Sub combination. And the thing I mentioned was to reduce the bass and reduce the Sub output, as well as increasing the volume. So I've done the first step, right? Now I'm increasing the volume to by about 5 dB, right? So I recommend not to touch the treble. There's nothing you can do about mid-range because Sonos doesn't allow mid-range adjustment. There's no parametric EQ. So just leave the treble alone. No need to touch the mid-range, which you can't anyway. But for the bass, what you want to do is to try to lower this portion. Now, lowering the bass and lowering the Sub, they are interconnected, but they're not the same thing, right? Lowering the Sub will bring down volumes from about 200 hertz, or maybe even right up to the mid 250 hertz or so, and they will bring down the entire curve right here. So my recommendation is to bring it down by about 2 notches, right? To cover up this whole area here. Now, the next one is to reduce your bass output, and that I recommend bringing it down by 3 notches, right? So how the bass output is affected by Sub adjustment is below 110 hertz or so. So with that combination of sub -3 and bass -2 from where you are, relative to where you are, all right, it should be able to pull down this curve here in the bass region and tame the overall sound signature a little bit. And of course, that is assuming that you have already increased the volume to get to the same perceived volume that you had before the 14.12 update. Now, if you don't increase the volume, then you're going to be wondering, by reducing the sub and reducing the bass, you're going to be hearing even less things, all right? So the most important takeaway for this 14.12 update is that your volume needs to be increased. Now, which leads me to the most important reminder, which I didn't really cover in my last video about 14.12 update. If you have volume limiter turned on, I'm just going to pull up a screenshot, maybe I'll just show it here. If you have volume limiter turned on in your Sonos S2 app, remove that, right? Because you'll be wondering, even if you push the volume all the way to full scale, your volume is still going to be limited by that setting, right? So remember, check that setting. If you have inadvertently or accidentally turned it on before, you should remove that. So make sure that the setting is not turned on. Otherwise, with the reduction in volume, overall volume, brought about by 14.12, you're going to be suffering even less volume. Personally, I don't go beyond 50, 60 when I'm listening, so I don't get that problem. But if you are regularly going into 80 or 100 full out, maxed out volume, then you need to take care of that particular setting. Okay, so I'm going to be moving this back. Yes, this is a Apple Studio display with color match keyboard and trackpad. And I actually have the Studio, the Mac Studio, that is tucked below the desk. So this is a pretty expensive and a complete overhaul of this studio. I might make a video of that. I did take some videos of the unboxing, but another story, another day. What is important for today is that we try to rally ourselves behind this request to Sonos. Now, Sonos, you have announced your Q3 earnings, right? And it didn't look good. Your stock tanked significantly. I think it was a drop of about 25%, which is not funny, right? $23 US, $22 US, down to at one point even below $17 US within the span of 24 hours from your announcement. So not great, right? So if you are now considering whether you should be listening to us consumers, let me give you a suggestion, or maybe two, right? You can either implement a parametric EQ, maybe hide that setting behind a pro mode, right? Where users like me, who are more comfortable with setting our own sound signature, will be able to unlock that feature and mess around with the sound profile to get something that we like and we want. The other suggestion is to, at the very least, allow for a center channel or dialogue dial, right? Where you can change that center output, the center channel output, from -10, -15, all the way to +10, +15. It's the same as what you have been doing for the surround, where you can adjust the levels. And with the Sonos Beam Gen 2 and the Sonos Arc, you have also allowed for an increase or a reduction in the heights effect. So it is not something that is difficult to do. I strongly suggest that you start thinking about implementing that and maybe roll back some of the whole sound profile changes that you have made with 14.12, but allowing the implementation of center channel control. Now we are in the 8th month of 2012, so we are almost into the final quarter of the financial year for Sonos, right? In fact, we are. And that means a new product launch. Now, I'm definitely going to try my best to get first-hand information on the product launch. And I will guarantee you, I will make a video of that new product the moment it's announced and the moment the embargo has been lifted. So if you are interested in what Sonos is going to announce next, do stay subscribed to this channel. If you are not already subscribed, click the button. It's just right there on the lower right corner. As for what product is likely to be announced, I only have two things that is in my head now. It is either the Sonos headphone, which has been leaked in some FCC filing or some patent filing actually, not FCC filing, patent filing of the Sonos headphones. So I think that could be ready. The other high possibility is the Sub Mini, which has been leaked even in their own app. It's supposed to be cylindrical. I made a video speculating about that just a while back. I'll probably link it up there. So if you're interested, take a look at that video and stay tuned. And I'm hoping one of these two products are going to be launched. And if Sonos wants to recover the market share and try to prop up the sales, listen to the consumers. We are out there, all the forums, this channel, all the comments in the on all over YouTube, on Reddit, on your own Sonos community forum. They're asking about the headphone, they're asking about the Sub Mini. And if you ask me which is likely to be more popular, the Sub Mini. You launched the Sonos Ray, which is a small compact soundbar. Yes, the bass is good coming from something which is even below 2 feet, but if you wanted more bass, what do? You're not going to get the Sonos Sub Gen 3, which is big and expensive. You come up with a matching subwoofer, which is smaller in size and hopefully maybe half the price of the Sonos Sub. Come on, Sonos. I am invested in you. I need you to make the right decisions. Peace out, and we will hear from you very soon. And I'll see you in my next video.
This is Dolby Atmos, the world's first object-based cinematic audio. With powerful moving audio that transcends from channels to moving around you with pinpoint accuracy. Whether the soundscape sets the mood of a scene,
Come on, you guys, let's go.
or captures the full extent
You wanna know my secret?
of nature's fury. This is Dolby Atmos, the world's first object-based cinematic audio. With powerful moving audio that transcends from channels to moving around you with pinpoint accuracy. Whether the soundscape sets the mood of a scene,
Come on, you guys, let's go.
or captures the full extent
You wanna know my secret?
of nature's fury.